Today, June 4th, 2019. We have a full agenda this morning. We'll start with some reports and discussions about service learning and social emotional learning, a policy subcommittee report, a financial report update. We are going to move an item from an action item to a report and discussion item. It would be the vote to appoint an EFPBC member. A number of our members did not receive the resumes and letters until late Monday, so in order to give members time to read and discuss that, we're going to just move that to a discussion today, and we'll vote on that in a few weeks, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Then we have some action items, some approval of minutes, some school committee meeting dates, some travel, a food service contract, the chair report, the superintendent report, future agenda items, and then we'll need to talk about what our next meetings may be. And then we will adjourn to an executive session for the purposes of discussing strategy related to union and non-union contracts, since to do so in open session has been deemed detrimental to bargaining. And then we will reconvene just to adjourn. So welcome, good morning. Doesn't appear to be anyone here for public comment, and we no longer have a student report, since we are happy to report that our seniors have successfully graduated. They had a lovely ceremony on Sunday. The senior class president delivered a lovely message both for children and adults about don't be an idiot. Which I think resonated with all of us who could remember moments of that in our lives and how we've learned from that in moving forward. So we really appreciated the seniors and their graduation. We will move on and begin with our service learning update and invite Anne Marie Tan, our new service learning coordinator, to the table.
Yeah,
sure. Yes, please.
And just move
and
the
use
microphone.
the microphone.
So who's going to drive your PowerPoint?
She's got a clicker.
Whoa. Power.
Fancy.
Okay, and is this fine? Like this? Okay. Please bear with me, since this is the first time that I've presented to you all.
So
Okay,
you don't hear
thanks.
yourself amplified, but that's so they can hear you on TV.
Okay.
It's still working.
All right. I've made the first few slides more general to remind us all why service learning is important and what exactly it is. So why service learning? There's many benefits from embracing service learning as part of the school experience. First and foremost, it develops youth leadership. Kids tackle problems. They think about they learn about the problems, but they think of possible solutions. They reach out to the community. They engage peers to collaborate. And then they actually embark on a project and reflect upon the positives and negatives. Students are more engaged. Typically, they feel that they're making an impact. It's an authentic experience, meaning it is a real life experience. And I can speak to this also as a teacher, that we are always encouraged as teachers to create these authentic experiences so kids understand why they're learning something. But in my experience, a lot of times you encourage the kids to make a poster or a flyer, and then it doesn't go anywhere. We encourage them to take them home and share them with their parents, and a lot of times they don't. And when you have service learning, you're actually engaging with the community, and it's a real life experience. Also, students learn about possible careers, from working outside to working for nonprofits, but even from the aspect of planning and organization, they're also learning real life skills through these experiences, building a sense of community, whether that means within their school community, within their classroom, or even connecting to the world at large as they learn about different problems that affect the local community, but also the greater national and worldwide community. And they also begin to see links that they are not isolated here. Things that affect people on the other side of the world are also relevant in their lives. And again, the authentic assessment. I wanted to point out that service learning directly supports the 3 beacons of Winchester Public Schools' vision for learning, individual pathways for success. Some of the teachers that have embarked on service learning this year actually designed lessons where kids were working in small groups. Each small group did take on a different way of fulfilling their project. Sometimes kids worked together on the same project, but they all had different roles. And it's a great way of differentiation because kids are working as a team, so just naturally everyone's doing something slightly different. Communities of collaboration, the very nature of service learning is that you're working with others to address a problem. And healthy balance in wellness, it's documented that when people do something for others, they actually feel good about themselves. They feel empowered. They feel a sense of purpose. So I believe service learning really is integral to addressing the whole social emotional learning and mental and emotional health of students. Okay, and this is a little visual about social and emotional learning, but I think all of these components actually directly relate and are reinforced by service learning. If you look at the outer ring homes and communities, I am working towards bringing more collaboration between the PFAs and the teachers and the students. What I've learned this past year is that the parent groups are doing amazing things, but it seems to be in parallel to what's happening in the classroom. And I'd like to work in the next year in creating more collaboration because the parents are willing, the teachers would appreciate help, but it's a matter of making that connection so it's easy and natural. And that's an area for development. And definitely the schools, kids can be serving in their schools, and also even within the classroom as kids reach out and have learning experiences serving others, they're naturally learning about working together, and it can create a more cohesive classroom and encourage teamwork among the students. And also, as the kids are going through these projects, they are learning all of the various components that are there. They're learning more about themselves, self-management. If you're volunteering somewhere, you have to learn how to be responsible for yourself, making wise decisions about what you should or should not do, the relationship skills of working with others, and also the social awareness of how others are feeling, the people right in front of you, but also the people that you might be serving. Another area of overlap, an area that service learning reinforces, is the school district's movement towards creating more performance-based assessments. The very nature of service learning is to do a project. I don't want to say that necessarily we have to make these projects an assessment where kids receive a grade. Some teachers might choose to do that, but that's not necessary to make this an effective experience. But the teachers can be making informal assessments without actually giving a grade also, in terms of team working skills, presentation skills, writing skills. All of those can be assessed, and it's data for the teachers to use to work to further their planning. And so the service learning component directly can be used to support our movement with in collaboration with MCIEA, which is the consortium that the district has been working with the last few years to bring more rigor and support to the teachers creating these performance-based assessments. At the end of the year, most recently about a month ago, I did put out a teacher survey to get feedback. And the biggest feedback I got from teachers was that they really felt like they needed more help in creating these projects. and more professional development. So a big move towards that is our Summer Institute of Learning. I'll be offering a few different seminars. One will be specifically on building teamwork with a social emotional learning component. Having been in the middle school previously, I know that building teams is very important, especially for the sixth graders. So I've already reached out to the sixth grade teachers and suggested, as part of team building at the beginning of the year, would they be interested in doing a service learning project? Because a lot of times, we play get to know you games, but I thought this would be a powerful way. I've already started collaborating with the Discovery team and the art teacher there, and brought Principal James Lynn in to know what we're planning. I plan on reaching out to more teams. There's some interest there. I will also be reaching out to the elementary schools with this idea. And as one of the seminars I'm offering, it would be to help people plan this, whether it's at the beginning of the year or sometime during the year. Also, I will be targeting social studies and science, because there's a lot of projects that I see have overlap, especially with the climate, natural resources. So whether a teacher's a science teacher or social studies or an elementary school teacher, I see great potential for interdisciplinary learning. So that will be another specific one that I will offer. And then another one that's very targeted is literacy and social emotional learning. Especially because I noticed that at the schools, many of them already do drives and fundraising and collections, like the Thanksgiving food basket. And a great example of bringing literacy in and changing something that was a simple collection of donations into a learning experience was the fourth grade at Lincoln. Read some picture books about that they were fiction, but they dealt with poverty or not having enough food to eat, and the students had a discussion about that. Then they created a presentation, and the fourth graders went to all the classrooms in the school and discussed the Thanksgiving food drive and why they're collecting the food. So the Lincoln school teachers were really successful in taking an already established food collection that might have previously just been something that the parents, as an afterthought, said to themselves, I have to run to the supermarket and get something. Instead, it became a really collaborative effort, and it was also tied into literacy. Right. I have some examples of service learning. This is in no way exhaustive, but just a few highlights. At Lincoln School, they had an exciting time last fall where they had a singer-songwriter, Jesse Rubin's, visit, and he kicked off the Yes We Can movement, which extended through the whole year. And the way they set it up was Jesse came for one day. He sang some inspirational songs, and he visited all the classrooms and talked to the kids about what can you do, whether it's something that just individually they're proud of or how can they help others. And then each grade level took on a service project each month of the year. And it was a neat way of the students taking on leadership at their own level. I just talked about the Thanksgiving baskets. The first graders did a wishing tree, which I would say falls more under social emotional learning. They talked to all the classes about if they could do something to either help themselves, their family, the community, what would they wish for? And then each student came and hung it on this tree. And that in itself was a service learning project because they were building a sense of community in the school. They've also taken on some gardening in the back. One of the grades had 100 days of toiletry collection, so they actually incorporated some math with that because they were counting up sets of 100 items. And then the fifth grade did take action projects where the students actually designed their own project. Another example of service learning is Ambrose School visiting the Gables Assisted Living Home. It brings in, first of all, they're doing a performance, so it's presentation skills, multi-generational, so that's social emotional learning. They're building a sense of community, and they're also working together. And Vincent Owen, they visited the Aberjona nursing home. And that was kind of a neat visit because I was meeting with the 4th grade teachers at VO and saying, can you think of anything that you might incorporate in the classroom? And one of the teachers was saying, well, we're doing a whole unit on poetry, and I thought it'd be neat if the kids made Valentine's Day cards. And then we collaborated with the PFA, which brought some of the kids over to the Aberjona after school so they could present the Valentine's Day cards to the residents there and sit with them and talk with them. So that was a really great experience too. And the PFA there is very involved. They also participated in the Rise Against Hunger food packing. We had someone from Rise Against Hunger come and talk about the geography of in Africa and talk about food scarcity, about droughts, and why we were doing the food packing. And then the kids participated in that. And that was sponsored by the Rotary Club, so that was a great example of collaborating with another organization in the community. And I wouldn't say this is a new initiative. It's a revamping of a previous initiative. At Ambrose and VO, they have sister schools in India, and it was started by a nonprofit called Live, Learn, Act. That was a very small nonprofit run by some parent. Those parents, their children have aged out, and so they met with the principals of VO and Ambrose and myself and Karen Connolly with WIFI and talked about what could be the future of this organization, reboot it. So Live, Learn, Act is dissipating, but they're turning over a small amount of funds to WIFI that we will then be able to use for global service learning initiatives at all 5 of the Winchester elementary schools. So I'll be working with the elementary schools with that, and I will be seeking champions in each school, meaning teachers that are pretty enthused about it, that would be interested in helping their school in collaboration with myself to further global learning. Okay, and at McCall Middle School, a teacher, or I should say a parent, reached out to us in the fall. This parent is heavily involved with an orphanage in Haiti. He's also a civil engineer. His name is Mr. Craig Miller, and his daughter's in 6th grade. So he said, I'd love to collaborate with my daughter's team to bring my knowledge and skills and talk to the kids about this and see how they might be involved. So he came and he talked about the physics and design of playgrounds, because he was going to design and install a playground for this orphanage in Haiti. So they actually went out to a playground and learned about the physics of playground equipment. He showed them how to do a design and think really about like the logistics of how do you lay out a playground. Something that was neat that I thought came out of it is as he was talking, he wanted the kids to give their ideas. And some of the kids said, well, we noticed from your PowerPoint of the orphanage that the kids are playing soccer and you haven't left any space, open space for the kids to play soccer. So he actually took that input into his playground design and realized that, especially, we might have our own concept, like a playground has this kind of equipment, and then to the side you have a field. They don't have that luxury. So the kids were actually able to give that insight. And then he took their ideas and used it in his development of a playground. The 7th grade worked with the 5th grade on a book discussion called The Boy Who Harnessed the Wind. It's a book, and I think it's also been turned into a Netflix movie. It's about a boy in Africa that figured out how to build a windmill to generate electricity. And he's given TED Talks also. And so the kids read this book and they discussed the book, and then the teachers also did some hands-on activities. They built a windmill from a kit. They did a lesson on the geography. You can see that upper right-hand corner where they have a large map from National Geographic. And then it culminated in that food packing experience, which the kids from VO also attended, but we also had kids from Lincoln and McCall, and also kids from the high school. So that was really also a great experience because it was multi-age experience with the food packing. Most recently, last week, the Gemini team from McCall put on a health fair at the Jenks Center. That was a great experience for them because, you know, it's common for students to be given an assignment where they have to do a PowerPoint or make a poster, but then they're not presenting it to anyone. And in this case, they brought over that we collaborated with the Jenks Center. They set up tables for us, and some of the seniors came through, and the kids were able to use their presentation skills to explain what they were doing. And something that really impacted me as I went around, because some of the kids had similar topics, even though all the presentations looked different, I started just saying, what did you find most interesting that you learned? And every single kid was able to say something. And as I went around the room, you could tell kids were at different levels of, in terms of their presentation. But in terms of what they found very interesting and passionate, it was across the board the same amount of enthusiasm, that they all found something that really interested them. And I don't know if they would have had that ability to articulate, to think about, process, and articulate if you didn't have some sort of presentation like this where people were wandering around. So we are looking to collaborate more with the Jenks Center because the people over the Jenks Center are really enthused about us using their space. And from their point of view, the more things that they can offer to people in the community to keep the people visiting the Jenks Center, the better for them also. So it's a win-win situation. Right? In 8th grade, Corinne Hurley, she's a new teacher, but she, took a chance and had a climate change take action project. She divided her honors students into small groups. And the reason why she just focuses on honors is she had 4 sections and she was a little overwhelmed to take on 4 sections of students. Or I should say she has 5. So 2 of them are honors. And she thought, well, I'll focus on them because they're a little bit more manageable. And the kids all had to have some connection to climate or environmental change. Some of the kids went over to the elementary school and talked about composting with kindergartners. Some went to 6th grade classrooms within the building to do a lesson on environmental change. Some of them, if you see the lower right-hand corner, sold water bottles that are reusable, and so they can encourage people to cut down on plastic waste. So they had a lot of different ideas, and they were really encouraged by the ability to address these issues. And a kind of a neat connection with ELA, Corinne was telling me that when the kids took the MCAS for English, they said, oh, we had to write a letter for this year's MCAS, and you made us write emails to people in the community to explore our topic and figure out what we could do. So that was, a great overlap. And I think sometimes we see everything so individually. There's math, there's science, there's English, and we forget there's overlap. And here the kids, realize, oh, that's why I need to write well, because I had to reach out to someone in the community and they had to understand what I meant. And in fact, it was a great learning experience too, because I don't know if you exchange emails with kids, but sometimes they're very abrupt and they address you by your first name and they don't say please and thank you. And when that first happened to me, I was kind of insulted, but I did learn as a teacher to go talk to the student, and I would say 99.9% of the time it's unintentional. They just have not been trained. So this actually provided a great learning experience because they did get feedback that 1 or 2 teachers felt that they were very abrupt, but that was in a learning experience. They were able to learn, okay, now how did you write this? We need to do it again. If they never had that experience, they would never know. And that their first email to someone might be to a college or someone they want a job from. So this is just a great example of the importance of these projects. Also, our district is involved with Project 351. This is a nonprofit that recruits 8th graders from each town and city in Massachusetts. And on Martin Luther King weekend, they had a day of service. So I went with Monet Vinciguerra from McCall Middle School, and we went to a school in East Boston and painted the gym. And then she also ran a collection for Cradles for Crowns. And when she's at the high school, I'm hoping to recruit her for the Connect and Commit Club because she's into student service. She also serves on the student council at McCall. So that is something that I would like to grow in myself, is my relationship with Project 351 in the next year, and networking with other professionals that have similar positions in their school district. And then at the high school, I am faculty advisor to the Connect and Commit Service Learning Club. So the kids learn about issues and then they do something hands-on to focus on it. Each month they have a different theme. They talked a little bit about what Indigenous Peoples Day was. They learned about mental health and stress relief. They talked about rescue animals. They actually had some rescue dogs come, and then they did a fundraiser. And they also had someone from the Mystic River Watershed Association come. So that club will be continuing. And it's a really nice club because they typically have about 50 students come, anywhere from 30 to 50, and they're very welcoming. So it's a non-competitive atmosphere. Eileen Milner, French teacher at the high school, has started a drive for the Zen Garden Club. Probably many of you know about this already, but she's recruited a lot of students who have concerns about the social emotional status at the school, and the kids came after many months of discussing and planning and revising. The kids themselves have collaborated and come up with a design with the help of Peter White, who's from Zen Associates, who's donated a lot of his time talking to the kids. They've worked on budgeting and fundraising. So the kids are learning a lot about planning and how to raise funds, public presentation skills. And it's a real nice group where it's a very diverse group of students. And then I'm advisor for Relay for Life of Winchester, which is a benefit for the American Cancer Society. And here's a little plug if any of you are interested, if you know someone that'd be interested in helping with that, in terms of recruiting people to actually participate in the event next year. One thing that came out of it, and I did a wrap up with the students, that we need to do more outreach to cancer survivors and caregivers. This was something where it was a learning experience for me for my first year, because I approached it totally as a fundraising event. And then having been there and worked with the students and talked with the survivors there, I realized that it's only part of it is that it's fundraising. It's actually designed also to be a time of encouragement and celebration for cancer survivors and their caregivers. And the students recognize that themselves. So I saw I was impressed by the students. And actually they were saying we need to do more on that. And so we've talked about reaching out more to Winchester Hospital next year and actually reaching out, finding out who we should be including in this event. And my goals for continuing expansion for next year. This year, I set up meetings with grade level teams at all the schools. That was very effective to kind of find out what's going on and let them know what my role was. But I need to continue doing that. And now that teachers know who I am, I plan on scheduling times at each of the schools where on a routine basis I'm there and available if people just want to drop in. I also will continue to make appointments to speak at department and grade level meetings. Now that I've done that this year, I think next year if I just go for about 5-10 minutes at the beginning of a meeting to just remind people who I am and how I can be supportive, that will be effective. Offering more professional development seminars and not just introductory, this is what service learning is, but actually make it more directly related to content as I mentioned earlier before, and grade level appropriate. And then also, I would like to increase my interaction with the parent organizations across the schools. And I've already made inroads with several of them. And so I want to continue to grow in that. We are also going to work on developing global education initiatives across the school. I mentioned Live, Learn, Act. And I've also I've spoken to middle school teacher Chris Reves about at McCall starting something that is encouraging teachers to do service learning, but also connected to global education. And we like to develop some guidelines that are interdisciplinary. And another area where I saw opportunity and need is for myself to become more aware of community service opportunities that individual students or even families might want to get involved in, for myself to be a resource. And because I actually did have students drop in and say, I want to volunteer somewhere. Can you help me? And I was able to hook up a student with Right Lock Farm. A student went over to the Aberjona Nursing Home. And so I would like to be able to be known as a resource for people in the community to contact. And finally, I started developing a blog, but I did not get very far this year. So that's one of my goals for next year, to increase communication, is to really develop that blog so people get to know it as a somewhere they can go to check out what's going on in the schools in the community. Okay. And does anyone have any comments or questions?
I want to commend you. I mean, this is exactly the vision that Judy set out, Dr. Evans set out when she was putting the job description together. Something that connects social studies with science, literacy with SEL, like you were saying, social emotional learning. It is so rewarding to see it all come together, and to see that you are also including the different generations, the intergenerational work. And so this connectedness of taking service learning and placing it on top of curriculum and everything, it's just, it's so amazing to see it coming to fruition. So I really want to thank you for getting this launched so incredibly successfully. I can't wait to see what you do with it in the future, and I'm completely on board to support you and work with you through Lynch and as a school committee member. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
I have a question. Anne-Marie, when you described an interest in working with the PFAs, that you described there are some efforts maybe going on with students that are happening, how do you use the expression parallel? Mm-hmm. Can you give us maybe some examples of what those might be, how you would look to engage? And are you thinking more about middle school and high school, or are you thinking K-12? If you could expand on that a little bit.
The ideal is K-12. I think I don't want to say the easiest place, but maybe a natural fit to start with is elementary school, because I think parents who have elementary age children are most interested in dropping in and seeing what their kids are doing. An example is at VO, they actually have a 5th grade committee that is just to set up service learning projects, and every month they do a different project or a fundraiser. And so that is, that's a great opportunity there. And also, like at Lincoln School, the PFA, I believe, helped fund Jesse Rubens. So a direct example is the teachers, had the kids write Valentine's Day cards. But, as teachers, we can't put the kids in our car. There's the issue of renting buses, and are people going to want to pay for a bus to go over the nursing home? But there were parents willing to drive the kids after school, and it can be sponsored by the PFA, but what they brought over was things that the kids did during the school day in the classroom. So that was just a great overlap, and the parents were really happy to come. Another area I mentioned the collaboration with Craig Miller with coming in and talking about, he brought his professional experience and the kids got to see what he does as a job, but they also got to see a service experience. So if I am able to recruit more parents that, have in their professional or their volunteer lives, something that they want to bring into the classroom, that would be great also. And also any of these service projects, I hope that we can start doing more like outdoor projects. Maybe even it's collecting trash along the Aberjona, but definitely you need supervision. So that's another natural fit where, parents might be able to give a couple hours of their time and provide extra supervision. And it's just a matter of collaboration. And what I've noticed is that, our teachers are really highly very committed in what they do, but sometimes they're hesitant to reach out to parents, or they don't. And I know this from being at McCall. I really didn't know what the PFA did. I kind of knew there was a parent organization. I knew they put on this lovely lunch for us that we were all like really grateful for, but I really didn't know what they did. And now in my position, I have this, I can see how I can reach out to them. And I've noticed the parents are really willing to help, but they don't know how to connect. And the parents don't know how to reach out and say, I could really use this help. So I'm beginning to just, brainstorm ideas of where those connections can happen. And because this is kind of a new area that people just aren't thinking in those ways, I think once it becomes more common and there's more examples, it's going to just naturally flow and catch on. But there needs to be that initial development and push where people I think I'm in a good position because at the district level I see what's going on at all the schools, and I can speak as being a teacher. I just didn't really understand that level or that view as a teacher because I was just so focused on my school and my grade.
Thank you.
I sort of want to piggyback on a little bit on Chris's question, although not with the PFA so much. Are you finding that there were a number of sort of community service projects and programs going on within the school that weren't sort of formed into a service learning that you discover, oh wait, they are collecting toothbrushes over there, but it was just sort of collecting them to give away, and they can be formed into some sort of service learning as opposed to just a drive for food on Tuesdays that would be posted. There must be a lot of those things. I know they've been going on since I was a kid, but I don't think I didn't feel like at the time I was learning anything. And I'm wondering how these things can be focused into a learning that you're discovering along the way. Is that?
Yeah, and for me, and what I'm also discovering is, I really need to lay it out very clearly for the teachers how to incorporate the learning. And that's why this summer I'm going to give the professional development about literacy. And I met with Katie Malone, who's explained some of the standards because she's a literacy coach. And I'm going to collaborate with her as I plan and go back to her. But she was basically going over the strands with me about, and with literacy, it's not just reading. If you can look at it, it's reading fiction, it's reading nonfiction, it's reflecting, it's discussion, it's the writing piece, it's even the public speaking. And you can tease that out from at the kindergarten or first grade level. It just might be like who were the main characters and what was this book about, and that can go all the way through. I mean, really through the high school experience. But in my initial training, I'm really going to target K through 8 with those experiences. So that is, to me, one of the quickest ways to bring it in is to bring the literacy component, because it's a natural fit, and all the teachers should be in general bringing those activities in. So it's my job to then coach the teachers and say, here is a great book selection that you can use, and bring out, make it easier for them so they don't have to, stress out about like, oh, what book do I look at, or what kind of writing assignment. So that's what I'm going to develop, is kind of a packet where they have like a choice of selections to make it easier for them. So that would be a natural way. I think social studies and background, and whether it's English or social studies, doing background and research, writing up a reflection on something. One area where I'm going to need to spend more thinking time is math. And I do believe there's a fit because if we look at any nonprofit, they have to talk about their results. You know, how many people did you serve? You know, how many resources did you use? But I've had some math teachers say, like, I don't see any way of, you know, bringing in math, but there are ways. So you just have to be a little clever. I think there's room for interdisciplinary learning, which fits more naturally at the elementary school level and even at the middle school where the kids are on teams. So all of this will take some set up to present to the teachers, because otherwise they'll be like overwhelmed, like, oh, it's a new initiative where I have to plan everything. No, we're going to give you the tools to do this and make it easier for you.
Thank you.
I have to agree with Zita. I really commend you on this wonderful experience for the kids and for the students and for the teachers. I was wondering, it seems that most of the projects are teacher driven, group driven. Can individual students initiate a project and run with it?
Well, the idea behind the service learning in general is to incorporate it into the classroom experience. The ideal service learning project, though, comes from the students. So Corinne Hurley's 8th grade project, where the kids learned about the issue, but they had to come up with their own approach to addressing the issue. That would be, I would say, like a classic experience, because that was very student driven. But you know, talking about can individual students do something, I think that comes into my idea that I want to also be able to be known as a person with, like, I don't want to reduce it to saying a list, but a list of opportunities in the community where if there's an individual student that is either required to do something or just would like to get involved, they know that they can drop by my office or go to my blog and say, oh, these are organizations. I actually did have a former student emailed me yesterday, and she said, I graduated last year. Do you need help today or next week? And I was, or, you know, do you know anywhere where I can volunteer? So I just off the top of my head said, I know the Aberjona Nursing Home is always looking for people to stop by and talk with residents. And here is activities director's phone number. So I would like to generate more relationships with organizations. And for example, I didn't refer her to Right Lock Farm because I know Right Lock Farm has an application form volunteers have to fill out, and it could take over a week to get back, and she was specific about this week. So I want to continue building up my network of organizations and be able to know, like, who you can just drop in on and who, yeah, they might want your help, but a month from now.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
Welcome.
I just want to echo what everyone else has said. I think it's amazing what you've been able to accomplish in your first year doing this as well, and just how organic and interdisciplinary your approach has been too. That these aren't projects that just feel like sort of one-offs, but things that are really embedded in things that both teachers and students care about and are making a difference even in our own community. So, and across globally with the Haiti project as well. So I just think that's been incredible. Where is your office for people to know? A couple times you've referenced people can drop in on me, or where are you physically
Well, where you
located?
presently, there's an office off the high school library.
Okay.
So that's where I am right now.
Okay. My only other question was about Live, Learn, Act that Ambrose and VO have been a part of for the past few years. Did you say that WIFI is taking that over? Or?
It's not that they're taking it over. That group has disbanded. They're no longer going to be. It was a group of parents
Right.
that had been together. So what they are doing is they're transferring their funds to WIFI.
Okay.
But WIFI is going to set it aside in a separate account that will specifically be used for global learning initiatives across the 5 elementary schools. And there's, because that's private money, that's being worked out between WIFI and those parents that were in charge of that nonprofit. but they have a, informal agreement with us, I guess I would say, or understanding. We'd met with them, we typed up notes. Anne Marie Rain was involved over, and also the principal over at Ambrose. Grant Smith is aware. So if there's an understanding about it, and we appreciated the sentiment behind Live, Learn, Act, and we believe it's something that should be continued in some form.
Great, thank you.
Sorry,
That's okay.
Jump in before you.
Sure.
Okay, just one suggestion. Sometimes community organizations don't know what they could use in terms of service learning opportunities. They welcome the chance to have a student project. They just don't know what. So I would suggest that your database includes also the mission of some of the organizations we have in our area, like the Multicultural Network, so that kids know that if they have a social justice interest, they can tap into that network and do something through them. So not just, don't just solicit opportunities from them, but also feel free to engage them with the students and teachers' ideas too. Does that make sense?
Oh, that's a great idea too, and that also gives more ownership to the students too. And that goes to what you were saying, is there opportunities for individual students. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks.
Good job, Anne Marie. Thank you.
And now we welcome Jason Levine, who's going to talk about connected social emotional learning.
Thank you. That's a tough presentation to follow. So thank you for having me again today. I'm here to talk about some of the advances and things that we've been doing around social emotional learning over the course of this year. I've broken down my presentation into the same general areas that I broke down my initial plan when I came in at the beginning of the year. So the first really is around our clinical and behavioral health. I really spent a lot of time this year taking a look at and working with our mental health resource teams and getting a sense of what our mental health support people, what their strengths and what our needed areas for growth are. Excuse me. And that has also had an impact on the beginnings of the expansion of our professional development offerings that we've expanded on this year and will continue to in the summer and into next year. As of right now, we have offered 5 new clinical PD offerings, and really what that speaks to is offerings specifically for our mental health support providers, our psychologists, our guidance counselors, our adjustment counselors, and social workers. And then also, in addition to that, 10 separate social emotional learning PD offerings that are meant for all staff members around embedding and using social emotional learning within the context of their classroom and working with their students.
Check with a quick
Sure.
clarification. So when you say five offerings and then 10 offerings, is that like 5 of the same thing? So we're trying to be flexible with people's schedules, or those are 5 different things on the clinical side?
Those, thank you for asking. Those are 5 different specific offerings. Some of them have been offered multiple times.
Thank you.
And same thing with the social emotional learning offerings, 10 different offerings. Many of them offered more than once. Absolutely. And please, if as questions come up, please feel free to ask. The other piece I've really been working hard with is getting and establishing relationships with our community resources and different providers within the community. One of the things that Winchester has a plethora of is community resources and different providers around the community. So it's getting a sense of what is the availability out there, what are people's strengths, and what are they able to, different organizations bring to the table to support what the school's mission and learning of our students is. Then I've also worked to build a connection with the different universities and training institutions around the area surrounding the training of mental health professionals, so our psychologists, our counselors, has a dual effect. One is that it helps to inform our practice with more current information that is coming out of the training programs. But with that, it also affords us the opportunity to bring in interns that have the dual opportunity of helping us to support our students more, but also in a way of being able to support their own learning and their path to success. The next piece is really around our curriculum, and I've spent a lot of time this year in these three different areas. One in the health and wellness curriculum, the human growth and development units is something that, as I came in, certainly needed some updating and development, and that is something that is still ongoing. We have made some changes in the practices for this year, but it's still something that is ongoing as we're continuing to develop the needed changes to meet the needs of our modern times. Also, we have begun to incorporate resources from Project Here, which is a substance use prevention education out of the state of Massachusetts through Attorney General Maura Healey, with collaboration with the Health Resources in Action and the Chris Herron Project. They really work to give educators tools and resources around substance abuse education. So this is something that really has begun to work with our middle school family and consumer sciences teachers, and it is specifically targeted at public middle schools.
And that's something all the students are getting
That is something that,
in 8th grade.
I'm sorry?
That's something all the students are getting in 8th grade?
That's correct. That's correct. So we do have family and consumer sciences from 6th through 8th grade. But at different points of it is when the substance abuse piece comes in. The delivery of service, one of the things that I've really spent a lot of time working with our support staff around is moving away from the mentality of only thinking about mental health support as a one-to-one service, but really being able to see how can we support all learners? How can we be supporting our teachers in their practices and working in the classroom to support our students? You know, when different communities took steps to include co-teaching as a model, and you know, obviously Winchester has made some great strides with that. Mental health support is one of those things that I see in very much along the same lines, in that it doesn't need to always be something that's done in a secretive manner, especially as we look to reduce the stigma of mental health and talk about it as something that should be talked about, and something that all people have a role in supporting. So we've looked at different opportunities to have our counselors interact with and support our teachers in the class and in their instruction, as well as beginning to offer more opportunities for group work. We find that many students, you know, aside from their work with their counselors, also learn a lot from each other, and the power of groups really goes a long way in that realm. Did you have a question?
I'll ask you. Keep going.
Okay.
Keep going. You may answer it as you go.
Fair enough. And then the supplemental curriculum, I wanted to take a look at what supplemental curriculums are offered, and in 8th grade, as Michelle mentioned, the 8th grade Family and Consumer Science class does a unit specifically on mental health, where they do use the Break Free from Depression curriculum, which is out of Boston Children's, and we have, in the same effort as mentioned before, having our guidance counselors begin to take a role in that class and begin to also be seen as mental health support people in the classroom. Next piece is around data and assessments. And the first piece was really around our planning, creation of an implementation of the state-mandated SBIRT screening. SBIRT stands for Screening, Brief, Intervention, Referral, and Treatment. And this is, the state mandate was that a grade in the middle school and a grade in the high school is screened on a yearly basis for substance use. And this is done. We chose to use 7th and 10th grades for our first implementation. Happy to say our screening went very successfully, and our team felt very happy with the training that we were able to afford them, the opportunities that we were able to support them in doing some mock screenings and training with the state before actually rolling out the screening. But we did the screening at the high school in the first weekend of December, and then followed up with the middle school. Did it just before, bless you, just before the February break. So that's what was for those.
Can you define successfully? How you said it went successfully. Do you feel like you were actually able to identify students at risk of these things, or do you feel like the implementation was successful?
So I would say both. I would say that the screening is not meant to catch large numbers of kids. What this is really meant for is for the students that are having substance abuse issues, that are ready for help, to be able to have a connection within the school where someone actually asks them about these things. And there are going to be a percentage of the population that are not ready for help, and are going to tell you everything you want to hear, and no, I don't use, and I don't have a problem with it. This screening is not meant specifically to catch those kids. It's really meant to give an opportunity for support and treatment for those that are ready for it. So when I say I thought it was successful, I'm really referring to the implementation efforts of it, because as you know, any new thing that goes on, and our counselors are certainly want to do it right, any new thing that's done. And when you think about taking on a new initiative like this, it can be very overwhelming. I will say our counselors dug right in, attended the training, was a part of it, were engaged, and it showed in the implementation.
Great, thank you.
Can I ask a related question?
Sure, go ahead. Clearly, too.
What do you do when a student says, I'm good, but I'm concerned about my friend who's using? When students actually are sharing information about their peers, is this a program that can take that information and make something meaningful of it? In other words, what you've just described, it's like student to counselor.
Sure.
We got some students who are concerned about their friends.
Sure. So, yes and no is the answer. And so what I mean by that is that the screening itself is not meant as a target to say, okay, let's divert this conversation to
Cast a net.
to your friend.
Yep.
However, what it is meant to do is also to build on the relationships of our counselors with our students, so that when there is something disclosed, whether it's about a friend, whether it's about a parent, whether it's about themselves, or anywhere in between, that our counselors are in a prime position to be able to take that information and work with them on whatever the next natural step is for the situation.
Okay. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I want to piggyback on what Michelle asked about success. I mean, this is under what's called data and assessment, but what you described about CBER would imply that we're not necessarily going to generate any. I'm asking a question: are we going to generate any data from that, or is it simply a screening to help those who are looking potentially ready for help? But we won't see like here's
Report.
a report. A report. That's a good word.
That's correct.
Okay. So it's not really data in that sense.
That's correct. I guess that's in that way. That's really where this was fit under the assessment piece.
Okay. Got it.
In working.
Perfect. That makes total sense.
Thank you. Next would be the conducting of the 2019 Youth Risk Behavior Survey, which concluded at the just before our April break. I have not been here for the previous administrations of it, but based on the numbers that I have, I've been told that these are the most completed surveys we've had before. From McCall, we had 875 completed surveys. From Winchester High School, we had 1,163 completed surveys. We're in the process of they're going through all the data now and bringing in the partial completed surveys, and what that would be, where a student started completing the survey and for whatever reason decided that they didn't want to go any further with it. So some of that is checking at, was enough of the survey completed for it to be included in the final results, or was it just a question here and question there? And so they're now taking that and going through all the final data, and we should be getting that as we enter into the summer.
And so people know who is they.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I'm sorry. JSI, John Snow Incorporated, is the administrator for the for our data sets that does it for the entire Middlesex region of schools. And now I'm in progress of also gathering student and staff and administrative feedback on the process of the Youth Risk Behavior Survey. And then lastly on this is the SHAPE assessment, which I've referred to several times. This is something that through the Massachusetts School Mental Health Consortium has really worked, currently now has just over 90 districts throughout the state involved in the consortium. And part of doing the SHAPE assessment is to give districts similar language to be talking about as you're talking about different mental health and social emotional learning initiatives from district to district. This is developed by the University of Maryland Center for School Mental Health, and it is a quality and sustainability survey that is done. The next piece is on Ruler and Mindful Schools. Ruler is for those that don't know, Ruler is a school-wide approach to emotional literacy, and has a few foundational skills, obviously developing the acronym of Ruler, which are recognizing, understanding, labeling, expressing and regulating emotions. This was developed by the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, and this is the foundation that our elementary schools began embarking on a number of years ago. Excuse me. And I have really been looking at how to continue to build on that and continue to really expand the work that has already been done here in the starting of Ruler and now building on that. So really taking a look at what are the different needs are in each of the elementary buildings, as I found that each building sort of has in having its own culture, also has its own different needs for its teachers around Ruler and the Ruler implementation.
Can you explain that a little more? Like, can you give us some examples how that would be? Does this pertain to like how it's presented to the kids, when they're using, for lack of a better word, when they're using Ruler in the morning? Is I'm just struggling to understand how it would be different.
Sure. The way it would be could be different is in terms of first of all, different teachers' trainings in Ruler, and the exposure to the Ruler anchors, and then also with that the amount that it is embedded within each of the classrooms, whether it be something that is, some classrooms focus solely on using the mood meter and really using the mood meter with fidelity, whereas some classrooms use all four anchors more often. And then you have in between, you have some classrooms that use the classroom charter and the mood meter concurrently, and then others that also build on that with the meta moment and the blueprint. So it's really been getting a sense of what are the constants and what are the areas that that everybody needs more support in, but also then sort of identifying where are some pockets that we can build some individualized learning for our teachers to be able to help them take the steps forward.
Because it's seen as particularly effective, in other words, right? In that certain school or that classroom?
Correct.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Then the next piece is around expanding Ruler and pathways to embedding it at the middle school level. Our members of our student wellness team at McCall received a grant through WIFI to attend the training, the Ruler training over this summer. So we have a team going to attend at Yale this July to really take a look at Ruler and take a look at how to then bring that back to the middle school with plans to develop training and bring our middle school along with that. Our hope is that as we build the professional development from that we're able to really bring that to life within our middle school over the next 2 years. This year we also launched our social emotional learning coach. The first year in her role, I can't speak highly enough around Stacy Bakuris and the work she's done over this year. She has worked to be in about 100 different classrooms over the course of this year. Has counted that she has done at least 862 individual lessons. And the feedback that I've gotten throughout the district on her presence and her guiding of teachers and her work within the classroom has been glowing.
Can I just clarify, Jen, that's almost every elementary school classroom in the district, right? At approximately 100?
Yeah, some people have had her in multiple times, so I think, Jason will talk about what our vision is kind of going forward, but, sometimes we have classes that have like a pop-up need that's more than other classes, so she's done some sustained work in some of those classrooms.
Then the next piece is on building on the progress we've done with mindful schools, bringing in more professional development, and not just on mindful schools, but on mindfulness in general, how to increase our teachers' skill, awareness, and use of mindfulness practices. I have been particularly impressed with our counselors at the high school level bringing mindfulness into their class workshops. We've had, even in some of my observations, have had the counselors doing some mindfulness activities with the students prior to going into talking about a college search or how to even begin the Naviance platform, and talking about how having balance and having a mindful approach to this really will serve them in their stress levels and being able to help themselves as they move forward. Also, they built in our adjustment counselors built in during the mid-year exams, what they called mindful mid-years, which was a number of different strategies and tools that they worked with students to help reduce stress and anxiety during the mid-year and finals period.
I just had a quick question
Sure.
about Stacy Pukuris and
Yes.
at the social emotional coach.
Yes.
What kinds of, could you just give some examples of some of the lessons that are taught in class?
Sure. For example, one of the lessons she's done. So one of them is she's called Big Feelings, and that really is around when students present with quote big feelings. What is that? What does it look like? What does it come from? And how to really understand the students' feelings and what behavior that might bring along with it, as opposed to just seeing the behavior as it is in front of you. I would say along those lines also, her and Kelly Cunha, our social worker from our partnership program, have co-developed a PD offering about different what you can expect behaviorally out of kids at different ages, and what that developmental timeline really looks like. Because I think that one of the things we can often lose sight of is that we want students to have certain skills, and we want students to be able to perform at different things, but is it always within their developmental trajectory for them to be able to do different things? Or when you see a behavior, is that common of their particular development and where they're at?
So when you say class lessons, does she go and like work with the class as a whole, like with the kids, interacting with the kids? Or is it with the teachers on how to recognize big feelings?
Both.
So there is a...
So yes. So at the start, Stacy really took the initiative to be the first one really presenting in classrooms where she was able to have that opportunity, so that teachers could begin to see her as an expert in this area, but also really working on her focus is really supporting their instruction. So she is not going to be in every classroom every day. So how can the teacher be able to expand their practices in it and be able to become comfortable with taking on some of these conversations that some teachers, frankly, are not used to.
Can I just clarify that a little bit?
Sure.
She's using the classroom experience as sort of as a coaching role so that the teachers will then be comfortable, say, the next year, teaching the big feelings
That's
lesson to their
correct.
kindergarten class. So then she can move on.
That's correct, and I would add to that not even just next year, but maybe next
going
week,
forward, yeah.
and
Okay.
being able to use that language that comes out of it. I think that is also one of the things I've really appreciated with it is the commonality of language. That just in exposing the teachers to the language that Stacy uses, teachers are picking up on that and being able to incorporate that into their lessons and being able to have a common language to be talking to other teachers about when it comes to emotional regulation.
And that language she's using is then also consistent with language from Ruler?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. And that is something that that I had mentioned. And really, Stacy was not trained in Ruler prior to coming to Winchester. So really, being able to get her trained in Ruler and then also begin to intersect the work that she's doing with the Ruler foundations has been a large charge of this year.
Great, thank you.
Can I ask a question about Ruler that
Absolutely.
might be a little naive, so my apologies.
Not a problem.
We've been doing this for a number of years now. How we're expanding it to the middle school level.
Yes, sir.
How are we assessing its success, its usefulness, how are we assessing it in general, as a methodology?
That's a great question. I think that in terms of a methodology, I think it is about, right now it has been about seeing the, when it's used and embedded consistently, being able to see the results in the classroom. I wouldn't say we have a large scale data, as you mentioned before. I don't know that we have that, but really the feedback from teachers around that when they're using it, sort of the effectiveness in their work with the students and their work with the comfort of understanding emotional literacy as a whole. Does that?
I think
so, yeah.
there were some assessments done before Jason got here, when the first year of implementation. Jen could probably look back to see what was working about it for both teachers and students, and there was some parent components of Ruler as well in terms of expanding so that kids could use the same skills at home that they're learning around self-regulation and understanding their emotions. This is one of those soft skills that makes it really hard to measure.
Absolutely, that's why I was.
You can measure the absence of dysregulation in terms of, classroom disruptions, suspensions, referrals, special education referrals, et cetera. Although, cause and effect is really hard to determine. Elementary teachers are measuring the impact of social emotional learning on student achievement all the time. We report on it to parents. We report on it in conferences, and sort of looking at those ready to learn skills. But in terms of sort of a recalibration, what Jason's really talking about is one of our concerns is asking the question, how well have we trained all teachers? How widely spread are people using all of the components? What additional training do we need to do? Those are the sort of assessment pieces. Whether this is better or worse or a better fit for us than some other programs that sort of sell themselves as, you do open circle or you do responsive classroom. We are a sponsored responsive classroom district, and then everybody gets trained on that, and then you sort of look at the faithfulness of implementation. There's what we like about Ruler is it really is not a program with sort of canned lessons that
Yep.
people just do mindlessly and kind of move on to the next one. And I think
Becomes when, and Judy's hitting it spot on. When there are only canned lessons, it becomes a thing to do as opposed to part of what you do. And I truly believe that social emotional learning should be a part of what you do, not just, hey, today we're going to do our social emotional lesson, and then we'll move on to it until the next time. And the anchors of Ruler are really designed to be able to be embedded within the curriculum on a day-to-day basis.
And I would assume one of your most powerful tools with any of this is just the common language.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
that when kids move from one classroom to the next, the expectations and the way we talk about things is the same. So the assessment of how common the language is across the elementary schools in the district is pretty powerful as
Yes.
well.
I would agree.
And I also think it's checking in. I think that since this implementation of Ruler, we're thinking of it beyond the, it's, morning meeting, this is when we do social emotional. We're checking in during science. How you feeling now? And, we have those beginning and end exit slips and that give us a lot of information. And to your point, I think the language is key. We talk about you need to be empathetic, you have to show perspective, be self-aware, but what does that really look like and sound like? And what Ruler allows, because it is just a framework, it's not a series of lessons, it allows for us to pull in the great work and knowledge and understanding of kids at their development, a Stacy. And next year we'll have 2 people that will be doing that and working with teachers to make it the norm. Kids are acting like they're acting because they're 10, they're 8, they're 6, and it's all going to be different. So if we all have the same mindset and just understand that we can have the best academic content-driven lesson unit, but if that social emotional, that comfort of self is not there, then we're gonna miss the mark every single time. So I think, we're getting there, but it's certainly at different places in its development of how much we're embedding versus this is one more thing.
I think schools spend a lot of time supporting controls on students historically, and sort of regulating the behavior of students without really understanding why they're behaving the way that they are. And so what really excites me about moving this to the middle school is that this will expand into the most challenging years of education, which are the middle years. And we're really blessed. We have very, very few students who are not compliant with school rules, but the getting to help them understand themselves is giving them the gift of learning for their lives.
Absolutely.
And so that's why this is way more important than, the Pythagorean theorem or the parts of a cell or who are the characters in Hamlet. And so this is the most important work that we do. But
I'm biased, but I agree.
But teachers are not necessarily trained well, and particularly
Humans, just not brains.
right, exactly. So they've got the content knowledge down and they've got the pedagogy down, but they may not know how to manage big feelings at any level. And so it's really helping to support the adults as much as the kids.
And I
Absolutely.
think that's true. Even in the PD, what's so interesting is as we talk about teachers reflecting on themselves, like part of what all the adults, even with the evaluators, what a lot of we have the PD with all evaluators once a month that talking about your own emotions and how that then impacts your willingness to or ability to learn something new or to be comfortable with something that you're trying. And so even on that level, we're talking about Ruler and talking about, well, where are you? What quadrant are you in? And how are you feeling right now about this? And then that impacts their ability to do something with it too. So that's been fascinating. And again, because Ruler isn't a canned, here's how you make a friend at recess lesson, it's applicable to the adults too. And like Judy said, for the rest of their lives, and we talk about it all the time, and I'm in the red right now. Hold on.
We parents
it too.
That's when you call it timeout.
So I,
Are we offering teachers support also then so if you're hearing more of kids' big feelings
Yeah.
and not knowing how to manage
Yep.
that, does this have anything embedded for teachers to learn how to deal with those feelings themselves? Does that make sense?
Yeah, so we've been talking about that.
Yeah, okay.
Exactly. And we're now saying, we're relooking at all of our PD as we're planning all these things for the
Right.
summer, saying, well, how do we build this into that?
Right.
Self-care and.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so that goes to exactly the second bullet I have up there for additional areas that we've made progress on. We have spent a number of our district evaluator meetings this year really focusing on social emotional learning, and whether that is ruler, whether that's through ruler or through other aspects of social emotional learning. We've had some very productive trainings and workshops with our district evaluators this year on that. Also, we've spent a lot of time working on developing our student support team practices. And as I mentioned earlier, our participation in the Massachusetts School Mental Health Consortium. Some of the things that I have identified as far as next steps, which we've been talking about, some of them as we've gone, is really the elementary and middle school ruler PD expansion, get really understanding what our teachers need and building on that for this summer and into next year for our professional development offerings. We have been working on developing the graduate course that we offer for faculty in social emotional learning. Continued growth of our social emotional learning coach role, opportunities for more in-class support that I talked about at the beginning, where our counselors can work with our students in the classroom as opposed to that one-to-one in office dynamic. And then looking at eventually building a community behavioral health event. So that was a mouthful from me. I know you've had the opportunity to ask questions throughout. Any last questions?
I have one a point. I think we heard from a student that a lot of the students don't take the youth behavior risk survey seriously, and so they fill it out as if it was a joke. And so I don't know, that was anecdotal, I don't know if that's true across the board, but I find that there's an opportunity there. You talked about pulling away from the one-to-one model and doing it more authentically and honestly in groups so that we're more comfortable talking about these things, and teachers using Google. All of these opportunities seem to give us a chance to present the survey as something where the students should be honest and serious about it so that it's effective. And I feel like the more comfort we build in the vocabulary and in, who are we truly, authentically, what mental health issues do we face, I feel like that would make the survey even more powerful if we can incorporate that introduction to the survey that way. Does that make sense?
Yes, I do think that there are always opportunities for us to get better. I mentioned that I'm in the process of getting some of the feedback from students, faculty, and administration. I do caution, though, in the thought that all students didn't take it seriously or a large group of students didn't take it seriously. I've had a few conversations with some of my counterparts in neighboring districts, and this is something that is frequently talked about, as you can imagine, and had even conversations with Janine Lavoie, who did at one time did some work administering the youth risk behavior survey in the district, and said even back when she administered it, some of these same conversations came up. I think that it is important to keep in mind that one of the regional directors had mentioned that in one of the surveys, I'm not sure which state, they had added 2 questions at the end of the survey of did you answer this survey to the best of your ability or with fidelity? And then the last question was, do you think your friends answered this survey with fidelity? And overwhelmingly, the answers were the same, that the students thought that they mentioned that they had answered it with fidelity. However, they thought that their friends had not answered it with fidelity. That being said, I always think that there's opportunities to improve on practices when you're trying to incorporate student voice. And so with that, that is why I'm going to be meeting with the student council tomorrow night, and going to be talking with other student groups and teacher and administrators about the process to see where are our opportunities to improve it.
And that's why I said it was anecdotal, because I can imagine a student reading these questions in between them and the paper. They're very honest, but when they're talking about it and debriefing with their friends, it's like one big joke, because these topics are so serious, and so that's the natural response, I would think.
And I agree. And I would say, as many teenagers, when it comes to talking about some of these topics, it's not comfortable for them to be talking about it, just as it's not comfortable for many adults to be talking about it. So with that comes some layer of joking about it or talking about that it wasn't answered seriously.
And then just to wrap up my questions, I just really want to thank you for the work you've done, just like Anne Marie, within a year, and Stacy and everyone. It's just amazing, and I love the professionalism, the openness, just the heart you've put into this this career. So thank you.
Thank you. I have great support around me.
So just to second that, I agree with everything she just said, but especially when you show up in the role and there's a whole plan that's been developed without you kind of being here, that I appreciate you kind of took it and took time to study it and learn how we're doing as a district from the moment you hit the ground running. So I'm going to go back to the dumb question that I was jotting to Zena earlier, and I'm sorry if I was a distraction. So FACS, Family and
Consumer Sciences.
Consumer Science.
Yes.
The dumb question is that the more current expression of what some kids would call health class, or no?
Yeah,
Okay.
yes, yes.
That's what I thought.
So it's really meant to incorporate health as well as living skill,
Right.
As well as independent living skills.
So here's where I'm going. Here's where I was going with this. The break. Given you've spent some time talking about the supplemental curriculum, break free from depression. My sense is, for a time anyway, we had some kids on IEPs at McCall who were maybe not as engaged in health class or FACS as they otherwise would have been, just because either the learning center model or pull-out services. I think some of us around the table are aware, for some kids on IEPs, there's core requirements, and then some students and families struggle with, how do I balance that, for instance, with arts or music or even world language. Some kids have been told, given your IEP and your support, maybe world language doesn't work. So this may really be a more fair question for Pam Gerard, but I want to just ask, are our kids on IEPs getting the same exposure to break free from depression?
My understanding is yes.
Okay, given that it's being provided in that setting.
I think that there's been a shift in the district to try to have more flexible schedules, and in the future, there are some students with disabilities, a wide range of disabilities, who simply cannot fit everything they need to learn into a 6 or a 7 hour day.
100% agree.
And so, in the most recent teacher contract, we won approval to have flexible days for some of our special education service providers in particular. That would allow us to flex some of those additional services into before or after school hours. Not that we want to have students be in school longer than they need to be, but faced with a choice between being in the band and getting your services, we have to offer the option, I think, outside the regular school day increasingly in the next few years. And so that's the direction we're moving. But I think, health, family, and consumer science, which, encompasses a lot of things. And at the high school, it's all sorts of additional things like the cooking and sewing and some technology and a variety of sort of hands-on learning experiences. But at the middle school level, that's really where health happens. The direction we're going with PE and health is a much more integrated approach, I think, as we sort of think about that. I have long spoken about my desire to have more health education at the elementary level. There are just so many, it's hard for us to fit in everything. And we have a short school day, a short school year, and so trying to make sure that everything we do is meaningful and that students don't get shut out of things is really important.
So Judy, I appreciate everything you said, and I'm with you 100% when you talk about where we should be going, philosophically, ideologically. So maybe what I should do is just ask the question a little more pointedly, and it's not fair to expect Jason to be able to say definitively at the meeting, but I would like to know that our kids at the middle school on IEPs who have schedule modifications are getting exposure to the break free from depression component that you described, because I think some of those kids, perhaps this is naive on my part to say so, but I think some of those kids might be especially vulnerable. And so that's my question. So maybe that's a follow-up we could hear from Jason or Pam, because I think if we walk that walk and say that especially there's some components of this that are really important, then help me feel more comfortable that we're doing what we need to do at McCall so those kids are getting that exposure.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
We'll follow up on that.
I'd be happy to get a
Yeah.
follow-up for you on that, Chris.
I actually have a similar question about the depression and the updates to the health curriculum. When Zena and I met with the students at the QSA at the middle school, when we were talking about the gender identity policy, the students expressed a desire for more information, particularly for that group of students within the health curriculum and within the depression curriculum, and they were saying that waiting till 8th grade was too late. Is that something that we're looking at providing information on earlier to our kids or access, or do you feel like we're identifying those kids through the new SBIRT procedures?
That's a great question.
It's a multi-layered question.
I wouldn't link that to SBIRT as a way of sort of teasing that out.
Okay.
And SBIRT is 7th grade anyway, it's not 6th, even if.
Well, right, but I just before 8th
I get it,
grade.
yeah.
So can I jump in on this one,
Sure.
Jason? So I think what you're asking is our health and human development and sort of reproduction and the catch-all of relationships and safe relationships and emotional safety. Do we hit that early enough, and do we provide enough time to do that? And I think that's part of what the curriculum review is looking at.
That's correct.
And there's some efforts at the state level. I think there's a bill going through right now in the Healthy Youth Act that talks more about giving accurate medical information to kids in a way, not withholding information. And I don't think we've solved that yet. I think we still have a ways to go around where should we introduce that. It gets hit at a very kind of superficial level at the elementary level, but a lot of our kids are starting to have questions related to that. Could they benefit? That has to be a wider community discussion as well. So I don't have an
Not there
answer.
yet.
We're not there yet. I think we're getting better.
Yeah.
But I don't think we're there yet. And where I think we need to be, and where the data shows us, and particularly the kids we have. Now, the other piece, the sort of identifying students at risk piece, I think all of the work with the social emotional learning coach, the expanded one, a second one for next year, the student support teams, the transition plans that we have for kids who are transitioning in the district. I think there's a wider awareness about the need to not just assume everything is fine with kids if they don't say anything, and checking in with kids more readily. And so if there are students who are at risk, trying to find and reinforce that there are safe places for them to have conversations with with trusted adults is a key part of what we do every day. So,
Thank
but
you.
continue to get better at it.
And Karen, Brian? Thank you. And you are also a hard act to follow, so don't sell yourself short.
Thank you all.
Good job, Jason. Thank you for all your work. And I guess the next thing on our agenda would be a policy subcommittee report. Brian and I met, and I think, Brian, you're going to do the report on that
Definitely a
for
hard
us.
act to follow, so.
Yeah, I was going to say, so you get to follow Jason and Anne Marie.
So,
really
but this will be
exciting.
this will be brief, because we met as a subcommittee 2 weeks ago,
A week ago.
week ago, and we met very briefly to review two policies. The first we looked at was the social media policy, which is IJNDD. I can summarize this very quickly. We reviewed it and found it to be appropriate and current. So we didn't feel that any changes were needed at this time. We also reviewed the public comment policy, which is BEDH. We reviewed that in light of the court decision in the Natick policy. At this point in time, we aren't recommending any changes. We're awaiting any guidance from MASC for potential revisions if necessary. We really weren't ready to say that any changes were needed because we don't necessarily have the guidance to say that we need any, other than looking at the court decision and divining that we could make some change. Better to wait and see what guidance we get. At the completion of those two, we actually looked at I mean, that was brief. This was even briefer. We reviewed the two field trip policies, JJHR and IJOA. We reviewed, and we might need some slight adjustments, revisions to align the policies regarding overnight field trips. They actually have some sort of differing phraseology that we might want to just consolidate. We didn't propose
Perhaps some conflicting.
some conflicting, yes, but very
Minor.
minor. So we did not make any recommendations on those. We just looked at that and thought about it and said that this is something that we should be looking for in the future. And lastly, we talked in general about the need to consider consolidating our tobacco and drug policies, ADC, GBEC, GBED, JUCG, JUCH, and EEACR. We actually have 6 policies that cover that. So while, again, we didn't come to any conclusions, we discussed, at least in principle, that maybe we should look at them and see if we need 6 policies, and maybe we do, but look at that and see if we could consolidate those so you could go and find one policy as opposed to all the cross-referenced policies. So we'll be meeting again, hopefully sometime once we get some guidance from MASC and as well to work on the field trip subtle differences. Yeah. So I think that summarizes pretty much what
Yeah,
we
that was
covered.
great. Any questions about any of those, or where we're going forward, or anything else anybody thinks we need to be taking a look at? Awesome. Next, we have Ellen, who's going to update us on the financial reports.
So this is budget report as of where we are as we start to work to wrap up the end of fiscal 19. Our original budget appropriation was $50,272,465. We have spent year to date $40,976,824,000. We have encumbered. The bulk of this is salaries, $8,542,027. A projected encumbrance of $722,499. Again, the bulk of this is salaries, and that brings us to a revised available budget of $31,115 that I do anticipate will be able to spend down prior to June 30th. At this juncture, we have one more payroll going out for teachers, which will be a week from tomorrow, and then at that point in time, I'll go back through and rescour all of our budget lines, and then there'll be one more payroll going out at the end of June 26th, and that will be final payments for administrators as well as substitutes, ISS, folks who have, little bits left, but we're hoping to have the bulk of everything wrapped up in terms of salaries next week. We're in a very good place, knock on wood, I believe. There's still some concerns that I have regarding special education, some unanticipated expenditures that have come through just because, we have things that are changing. The question has been asked with the transfers from salary lines. We had an unusually high number of leaves of absences this year that resulted in us needing to shift some salary money around to long-term and short-term substitute lines. That's what that is due to. There was no situations where we didn't fill a salary position because we needed the funding somewhere else.
Almost all of them are maternity or paternity
Yeah.
leaves.
And it was also suggested that prior to the opening of the fiscal year, that I try to get as many of the salary shifting arounds done as I can. So when we open up the new budget, all those shifts will be done. So it won't be April of next year and we're looking back, looking at shifts from things that had happened right after the budget was done.
When will we have a better idea about any unanticipated special education expenses?
We're-
You mentioned?
So right now, I'm seeing Pam almost every day, checking in with her. So I think I think that overall, right now there are things that are on her radar, but we're on track.
So a couple of things, just a sort of a caution and a look ahead around special education spending and spending in general. Even though school gets out on the 18th, special education services continue till July 1st. There are some students who will get services and transportation in this fiscal year and into
Right.
next fiscal year. We have an allocation in our FY20 budget for extended year services. There are some students who will receive more services than we budgeted for, and others who won't use services, and so it's a little bit of a guess. As we have every spring, we have a number of students who were identified this year as needing either an interim educational assessment, a 45-day assessment at an out-of-district location. Some of those will result in out-of-district placements. As we continue to add students every year, although our number of out-of-district students as a percentage of our overall students with disabilities continues to go down, the number of students themselves will go up. And so we're looking closely at that. One of the things that we're also looking closely at is move-ins. So we've had a number of students who've moved to the district from either in-state or out-of-state, some of whom have students with very significant disabilities that will require additional staffing and/or out-of-district placements. So all of that's out of our control. Everyone who moves to Winchester gets educated, and we embrace those students and welcome them into our community and provide for them. And so in any given year, sometimes the costs can vary considerably based on that.
And we've talked about the move-ins before. Are these move-ins beyond the ones we knew about prior to doing the budget or anticipated prior to doing the budget, or are these?
So we don't really hold, we budget very tightly. We don't hold a lot of extra funding in case someone moves in. And so these are move-ins that were not anticipated at the time we did the budget, right?
Okay.
And so the other kind of unknown is how many of our students who are of senior status will take diplomas, particularly those in out-of-district schools. The trend, as I've said before, is the parents of those students can refuse the diplomas even though the students have met all the graduation requirements. And so whether or not we'll incur a tuition for those students in the summer and into next year is really a function of whether the students accept the diploma and move on to their next adventures. So still lots of unknowns around special education, but I just want to commend Pam and Ellen for staying very close to this. And right now, I don't anticipate any need to tap into the reserve. And we're going to look closely at funding coming in from the state. We anticipate that the circuit breaker reimbursement will be higher next year than we had budgeted for, which will help address some of these additional students. If we have students come in who require significant support, either in terms of additional staff members or special education services, we don't see that reimbursement until the following year, so we're always 1 year behind. But the rate is higher than we had budgeted for. The town is also receiving significantly more dollars under Chapter 70 than we had budgeted for. Those will go right back to free cash. And so, Ellen, do you need a vote on these transfers today?
That would be great.
Vote to accept-
Vote
Yep.
budget
As presented? I put it as a report, but certainly, we have another meeting on, we think, on June 20th. So if we needed to do another financial update, we could get it done then, but if people are comfortable, we could vote. But there might be questions before then. I don't know if
I
anyone
think
has
we've
any.
answered all the questions.
Okay.
Would you like a motion?
Sure.
I move we accept the budget report dated 5/31/2019 as presented.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks. And with that, we will move on to the EFPBC. You should have received via email, it's not in the packet, some information from the two candidates that are applying for our EFPBC position for the engineer position on the EFPBC. Judy, can you just take a minute and remind everybody, since we have some newer members, what the role of the EFPBC is and what the role of school committee in EFPBC is?
Sure. So the educational educational facilities planning and building committee, the educational piece of the puzzle is fulfilled by a combination of school committee appointments. I serve on the EFPBC, but the majority of folks on the EFPBC are either parents or community members, designated positions like architects, engineers, and there are currently two electricians on the committee. So really, it's the educational planning for the facilities to support our students, and that's really the only thing that this committee manages and plans, like the new high school project, the McCall Phase 1 and 2 project, et cetera. But the educational piece is really fulfilled by myself and a school committee member who is appointed, and that's Zena. The technical requirements for the other folks on the committee are fulfilled by the original designation of the committee, which was decades ago, right, when it was formed.
A town meeting.
Not quite 2 decades ago.
2
but
decades ago at town meeting.
Not charter.
Town meeting, yeah, town meeting, not charter.
Not charter, town meeting. And so this appointment is to fulfill some of the technical requirements, and so this appointment is a joint appointment with the select board. The logistics of this joint appointment are a little mysterious to me. Who votes first? Do people interview? Generally, for committees like this, there are long-standing members. I think the current chair, has he been a member since?
He's a founding member.
And there are several other members who've been there for many years. And then there are other members who come for a shorter duration. The town moderator also appoints by town meeting decree when this committee was instituted. So unlike other towns where there is a building committee, where the school department has actually more seats and
Right.
more control, I am only a member, I'm not the chair. And so it's a little bit of a process where we have to sort of vet folks who would like to serve on it, choose the best person. Select board has to agree with that in this case. So school committee has its own appointment, select board has a joint appointment, the moderator has appointments.
Right.
It's really a little bit of a convoluted process.
Finance committee has one too.
Did not know that. So, oh, she's the finance committee
Right.
appointment.
Yeah.
So I guess she would be another non-educational but non-sort of construction-oriented position. So as far as I know, there's an engineer position. There's still an architect's position open.
And they both have to be licensed in the state of Massachusetts.
By
Architect
town
and the
meeting?
Architect
and the engineer.
Engineer does not, I don't think, there's a higher threshold for the architect.
Yeah.
And that's by town meeting declaration
Finish
as well?
writing that joke in your own head. I will.
Yeah. Yeah,
As well it should be.
right.
Is that by town meeting declaration as
It's
well?
town meeting,
Yes.
When they
Yeah.
originally instituted?
Yeah.
yeah.
And so any changes to the composition of the committee would have to go
Go
I think,
through
go
town
back through
meeting.
town meeting, right?
Right. And these are also, they're appointed positions, so it's not always common to have more than one applicant for each position. It's not like these two individuals are running for anything.
They have just sort of both said, we have the qualifications, we're interested in doing this is our passion, and we'd like to be considered for this position on the EFPBC board. So,
Has select board voted?
the select board has not yet voted.
Okay, thank you.
The two candidates that you received information on are Todd Kosterman and Gita, somebody who is.
Matthew
Thank you. I was gonna say, can somebody who has served on the board please help me with her last name? Both are engineers in Massachusetts, and both of them have prior served on the EFPBC, and they would both like to be considered. We agreed that we were not going to vote today since you just recently received their information, and we'll vote at the next meeting. But if anybody has any questions or anything they'd like to share, feel free.
Can I go? So I want to thank you for being willing to stretch this out a little bit. As you all know, I had a lot going on in my household last week, sort of graduating a kid from the high school. So I was trying hard to read everything, Judy, you were sending us through the packet and so forth. So I missed, I'm sure I had it, the follow-up emails about the candidates. So Michelle graciously spent some time with me yesterday. I did not realize till yesterday morning we had, just for me, I was coming up to speed. I did not realize till yesterday morning we had two candidates for this engineering position. So it's Gita and it's Todd. I have to say I was a little confused about it because when I was chair, I reached out to Todd directly in the fall. I remember this because Ellen, it was a 2-hour drive to the University of Maine. And in a conversation with Todd, I had shared with him that his, in fact, I had just discovered his position on the EFPBC was up, and that's a moderator appointment. So when I saw the agenda, I actually assumed we would be voting on Gita, because similarly, before we reorganized, I got an email around April 3rd from an administrative assistant at Town Hall letting me know that Gita's term had expired and that she had moved on. So I did actually come to the EFPBC meeting, I think that week, in hopes that I could say thank you to Gita for her service, and I wanted to confirm she was moving on. And she actually indicated to me at the time she had every intention of continuing to serve. And she actually shared with me some emails that she had sent to Town Hall expressing her interest to continue to serve. My take on, and so my understanding as chair at the time was she had done her job to sort of share the information and that the posting process was in the works. My understanding is there was some confusion at Town Hall between whether it was something that would be posted by the clerk or maybe upstairs at the manager's office. Not throwing anybody under the bus, it just.
No, I think they're trying to tighten up their procedures with posting for
Yeah.
all the boards and
There
committees
was,
in town.
there was a process issue.
Yeah.
And so, and I made Mariano aware of that at the time. So I then subsequently understood that she was told she would need to reapply. So where I was scratching my head, though, was with Todd, you're quite right, they're both engineers. Gita is a geotechnical engineer. Todd is a mechanical engineer, so they're in two completely different wheelhouses. They do both important things at very different parts of the project. Some of the information that I did catch by email, I think, Michelle, you had shared with us a letter he wrote on April 29th to the moderator, to Peter Haley. So I confirmed this morning that Todd applied for the moderator appointment, and he was notified that he's been reassigned to the EFPBC on the 16th. So Todd is now reappointed and is a dutifully serving member of the EFPBC. So where I was having a sleepless night last night thinking I have to choose between these two awesome people who have two totally different areas of expertise, I've confirmed this morning, and Todd also.
From through Todd or through Town Hall?
Actually, Todd confirmed he got the notice, so I feel like I don't have to choose anymore, which makes me feel a lot more comfortable because he does bring a lot of expertise to the committee. So I just think this has been a little confusing for me, and I know you've been working hard to try to get information
Right.
out of Town Hall, so
Right.
it's not a criticism of you. I want to say a word about Gita. I've known her for 10 years. She is a geotechnical engineer. A lot of people don't know what geotechnical engineers are. They are civil engineers who are highly specialized and they understand the structures of soil. And that matters because when architects and structural engineers design foundations, there's two things we're trying to balance: It's the load on top of the foundation, and it's what's underneath that supports it. Geeta has been tenacious in the work that I've done with her on the VO and the high school project. She has actually caught miscoordination at the VO project between the landscape architect and the civil engineer. She was responsible for a redesign of some of the catch basins on the site when it was determined they were not sized properly. When she's engaged in the meeting, she's really engaged, and if she can't be there, I have many, many emails from her to the committee saying, I can't be there, this week, but these are my questions. And as I said, she's tenacious when she follows up. I feel like I sort of had some remarks in my mind, Michelle, I was going to give, but again, I feel weird saying it because now I understand Todd is actually reappointed to the EFPBC, albeit in a different role, but he's there. I do want to say that this is a real important project we have. We're about to start at McCall, Phase 2. And any contractor, any design team will tell you one of the biggest risks in a project is simply getting out of the ground. It's digging the hole, being sure that you're going to find what you thought you were going to find. Sometimes not. Sometimes the soil characteristics are different, and that requires a change in foundation. Sometimes you hit utilities, and how one supports those is important. Mm-hmm. Also, when you're digging a hole near adjacent buildings, there's a risk you can undermine those foundations. When you're bringing cranes and materials onto a site and you're imposing a load on the earth that you have cut some distance away, right? We study, it's called surcharge loading. That can be a very dangerous condition. So determining where laydown areas are they safe and so forth, all falls into the wheelhouse of a geotechnical engineer. And I felt I would be remiss if I didn't share with this committee. She has been engaged like no other on those kinds of issues, and I can personally attest to some of the things that she has caught, which, I would expect. Similarly, I have enjoyed watching Todd get engaged on some mechanical design issues for McCall Phase 2, which he did. There were some meetings I think we could have sold tickets to that were really good, and I think we have a better plan, because of his engagement. But we have that. We have a mechanical design, and it's done. But again, I'm pleased to learn, and I confirmed this with the clerk, and I even confirmed with Todd. He acknowledged he had just received that letter recently that he's been.
And I got completely different information yesterday, so I'm going to have to go back. It's a good thing we're not voting on this today because I will have to go back and clarify with the select board and town hall, because they are due to vote on this tomorrow. It's on their agenda too. So they are obviously have different information than both you and Todd.
And I just picked up on, I'll leave this with Frida, maybe
Yeah.
we can send information to the committee.
Right.
I have a letter from the clerk to Todd on May 16th saying this is to inform you the moderator, Peter Haley, has appointed you to serve.
Right, I have nothing for you, Chris.
I mean, this is very, very awkward.
Right.
I get it. I'm glad we're not
So-
voting on this right now.
You and me both.
I think, look, she's terrific, and I just want to go back to Judy's comment, too, about there are certain roles that town meeting is, I'm channeling my inner Susan Verdicchio for a moment. So when the EFPBC was created by town meeting, it was for a specific project, which was actually the library wing at McCall. So we're going back to like 1997 now. Then when another project was coming, it might have been the Ambrose project. In fact, town meeting sort of reauthorized, if you will. The EFPBC has sort of received an injection of support, if you will, maybe 3 or 4 times from town meeting, because it's not by charter. Mm-hmm. And so, in other towns, these committees sort of, they go away, right? Because their purpose sort of goes away. But the EFPBC does have a role in sort of fulfilling the vision of a master plan, and we have a master plan, and so of course they continue to serve. There are certain roles that are very explicit that were established by town meeting, and Judy mentioned some of those.
Right.
But even for what I would call for lack of a better word, the at-large appointments, the general moderator appointments, and many of those are parents, they still tend to be those who've got particular expertise, right? Mm-hmm. In design, construction, engineering. We've had a couple of lawyers over the past few years with particular expertise in construction litigation, and so everybody still kind of brings that perspective, which makes it a really cool owner's team.
Right.
And given everybody's unique professional perspective, my experience has been some people are more or less engaged at different points along the path, as you might expect, given the different sort of areas of expertise that people bring. Whereas, maybe somebody like Judy, she's got to be involved the whole time because you're focused on the end game, getting it done on schedule and on budget, and there are always decisions that are being made that impact the educational spaces.
So it sounds like we want to just wait and get verification before we take a final vote, because there may be one
Absolutely.
candidate left standing, and I think it's also advisable to continue to push on other vacant positions and make sure that those get posted so that the EFPBC is fully.
Well, and I think, as has been our practice, and I imagine at Town Hall too, I think it's just good practice for all the positions to get posted and whoever's interested in them to be able to apply, because while I certainly respect many years of service in a certain position, if somebody else wants the opportunity to take that role, either personally or professionally when they're volunteering, to be listed as, say, the architect on the EFPBC instead of just a moderator at large position, whatever their own aspirations may be, I think it's always a good idea to review anybody who's available and what they might want to do. And I think this is just good practice to be able to post and open it up.
Right, so there've been a couple of open positions for a bit, particularly the architect's position, which is a real key.
Tough one to
I think
fill.
it's a tough one to fill, but also a significant kind of void on the committee right now.
So I think we've had two responses, one of which has been confirmed as a totally qualified response.
Yeah, one is a registered architect, is my understanding, but we're going to
Massachusetts,
confirm
yes,
all of
yes.
that again.
Right. So moving on, that is fine. So is this something that we can defer until the 20th?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we have to.
I think we have to.
Just to, yeah, make sure we coordinate it. I think you have approval of minutes, but Frida and I didn't finish reviewing the minutes, so they're not in
Okay.
there. But she's done an excellent job. We're really up to date with all the minutes, except,
So that wasn't an email I missed, right?
you
No,
didn't miss it.
you didn't miss that one.
I thought I'd missed it too. I was like,
I meant to send something else saying, oh, we had aspirations, but I never got to review them with Frida, so.
So the next is the vote to approve the school committee meeting dates. I think we wanted to add in a
We
hold.
have the robotics trip next on the agenda?
It's coming up. It's D.
Oh, I'm sorry, it came after EFPDC. That's what
Yeah.
I was
Yeah,
saying.
yeah.
because we
We're
pulled
back,
that
yeah.
up to discussion.
Yeah,
Oh,
we
I'm
pulled
sorry,
that
I'm
up to
sorry.
discussion.
I'm with you. I apologize.
That's okay. So next in your packet, page 34, is the school committee meeting dates. I think we would like to add, to hold September 10th for the leadership team meeting.
That's a tentative, because I've got a
She
meeting
has
with
to meet with
leadership this
leadership.
week. I just want to confirm. That's the dinner, the annual dinner we have with leadership team at 5-ish, and then we talk about,
Yeah, so we want to make sure we hold that one for now tentatively. And also tentatively hold December 10th as an additional date that's not on there. And we will do times to be determined on both of those. And that would be just to give people sort of a heads up that that is in the middle of budget season and also a busy time of year for all of us. So, as it is the end of the year, and having that on your calendars might help you out in your planning. December 10th,
Can I throw a huge wrench, Michelle?
sure.
So, our last meeting was a little weird for me because I was looking at the dates afterwards and they were first and thirds, and it didn't feel right to me. And I know we were in a conflict. We couldn't go to Sally Quinn's,
Right.
presentation for Citizen of the Year. We actually usually meet on second and fourth Tuesdays of the month, not first and third. So, for instance, last year, we had some firsts. We met on February 1st. That was a special
Right.
meeting to revote the budget. We met on June 5th. That was a special meeting because the handbooks were time sensitive. And then the meetings on October 2nd and December 4th were both first Tuesdays, and they were specifically for the VO PPA and then the high school PPA, because those were kind of one-offs that were time sensitive. And I went back and looked, and our school committee webpage under our mission statement says we typically meet on the second and fourth Tuesday of the month. And so I think that's something that, while I can't say for how long we've been doing that, we've been doing it for a long time, and I think it works well with the other committees on which some of us serve. So we may not have Tuesday night meetings, but some of us have Wednesday meetings that are on like a first and a third. The calendar, for instance, this July 23rd and August 13th, those are fourth and second Tuesdays already.
Yes, those are just because that's when everybody was available this summer.
Right, but in other words, I'm saying that sort of
Yeah.
conforms with what we would typically do. And I wanted to suggest to you and the rest of the committee, there are always things that come up where we have to add a meeting. Sometimes we throw in a Thursday meeting, and, you know, this was a good example this year, right? Because we had a big override, we had to vote 2 budgets, and we were trying to react to whatever we thought we
Can I-
were hearing from state of the town and so forth.
Did you say we usually meet the second and fourth?
We do. We
And we
do.
did this year?
We have a wide range this year, I have to say.
I wrote down
Right.
all the dates
It's
right
not,
here.
yeah, the
So-
second and first and,
In January, we met on the 2nd and 4th. We had an extra on the 30th. That was a budget vote, which
Right.
is again pretty typical. In February, we met on the 2nd, but we also had that extra meeting on the 1st. We met on the 2nd in March, but we had an extra meeting that followed a week later, because there are things like spring break, right?
I think
February
there were a
break.
number of things that were getting in the way that required the first and third for the next year. For example, in November,
Voting
we're
day.
going to hit Thanksgiving on 2nd and 4th. In October, I believe it was a long weekend on the 2nd and 4th. In January, I think it was intentionally done. Frida, correct me if I'm wrong.
so I think what we're trying to do is keep the meetings 2 weeks apart. And so we can't start the first week in September because of Labor Day and, you know, the first day back for students. And so we just sort of started September 17th and went 2 weeks from there. And so there's never any ideal. First and third doesn't always work with school vacations, which is why we often have just one on the school vacation months. And I think it's more of a not whether it's second or fourth or first or third, it's folks know that you generally meet on Tuesdays.
And every other week.
Every other week. And so we're still sort of figuring our way around the AM and PM alternating
Right.
schedules here. What we're trying to do is land on the for sure dates so that people who want to bring things to you will be able to look ahead a month or two and see. So planning trips or major reports and so forth, so they just kind of know when the dates are, or they want to come and speak at public comment, they want to know when the for sure PM meetings are. I don't have a strong preference, but I think sort of following every 2 weeks just seems to make more sense to me than focusing on whether it's first or third or second or fourth.
And I don't have a strong preference first or third or second and fourth, but what I would encourage us is to have a schedule that meets every 2 weeks. And I believe particularly for the first part of the year, we wouldn't be able to get, for example, 2 meetings in December during budget season if we meet second and fourth. If we meet second and fourth in November, we're going to run into, there was another holiday there.
Yeah.
So I think that's why it was done in that way.
And I was probably not very articulate in bringing this up the last meeting. So I noticed, for instance, we have just one meeting shown, that you were just mentioning December 10th, right?
Right.
So we only had one meeting in December. We'll have a lot to talk about budget-wise. And then we typically vote at the end of January, just because there are always questions that come up. And we
Right.
like to give ourselves the time, right? So
Right.
there's nothing in charter that says we have to vote a budget on January 21st. We
Right.
typically vote a little later.
Right.
And so again, those are like first and thirds. It's true that, you know, even looking at 2018, we didn't meet every 2 weeks. Sometimes we met more frequently than that. But in every month but June, and then again, December we had 3 meetings, but they were all kind of many related to the override. Otherwise, in every meeting but June, we were meeting on the second or fourth or both. So I think to coordinate with either other towns and committees or even things like PISC, you know, there are just certain bodies
Those are Mondays.
that are accustomed to us meeting Right, but on certain weeks,
I don't know.
I wonder
think
if there's
we
an
set
effort.
the schedule that works for us, and
You know, I mean, our website says we typically meet on the second and fourth Tuesday because that's what we do. So I'm not saying it has to be that. We always
Right.
make we always make exceptions.
or we can change it to first and third.
And in fact, I
Bi-weekly.
chuckled when
Right,
I,
exactly. Thank you. Biweekly. We meet biweekly.
I chuckled when I went to the website just to look it up because I thought I would actually add in there, regular meetings of the school committee are usually scheduled for 7 p.m. on the second, fourth Tuesday of each month. And I thought we should add, and quite a few Thursdays, because
Yeah.
in some years, that's what we've done
Yeah.
as well. I just, to the extent we can try to grab some second and fourths, you're absolutely right, Michelle. I mean, it's a funny start to the year in September. We've got that 2-week block, right?
Right.
Because of New Year's and Christmas. If we can find some second and/or fourths, I think it'd certainly be helpful for me with some of the other duties I have in town. Because I had not anticipated the first and third sort of running forward.
I think it's probably, so a couple of things. The purpose in voting this calendar now is to let people know when our for sure meetings are. We're going to have many more meetings than this, but I don't want to encourage selecting those dates now because we want to keep flexible and do it within a week or two of when we need it.
Right.
Particularly as most of them are probably budget related. Because so many of the second and fourths aren't going to work for us, if the idea that we're going to do it is because it gives more certainty for other town groups, then that sort of defeats the purpose of it. These are the dates that work best, I think, for the committee to avoid major holiday weeks. But if there's a specific committee that meets on the alternate days, Chris, that you like to attend, or we can check with them because they might be meeting on these same nights too, or they might not because of the way the holidays fall.
So let me put it this way. We all have responsibilities. Some of them are to our town committees and boards. Some of them are
Right.
to our families.
Right.
So, been doing this for 10 years, primarily every second and fourth. This would be a big change for me. I realize I got to do some first and thirds. I'll have to do some Thursdays. I do whatever I have to do.
Right.
But if we're literally saying we're not going to meet on second, we're going to be meeting on first and thirds, that creates some challenges for me that I had not been anticipating.
Also,
So,
I was just wondering about moving the time for the evening meetings up to 6. I thought
oh yeah.
it started at 7, or I couldn't remember if it was 7 or 7:30, but.
That was something we had talked about in an earlier meeting so that we could have any executive sessions before
The
the,
executive sessions, I
Yeah.
understand. But if there's no executive session, then do we still start at 6?
I think there was some interest
a
in
little
some
bit of a
members in
challenge.
doing that, but it depends on the season, right? Some other sort of family, childcare responsibilities.
there was some interest in not ending at 11.
Ending at 11 o'clock at night was the main interest.
And the only way to do that is to move up an hour.
Certainly, on any given night, there might be something that hits the 6 o'clock, and you say, wow, that's a bad time because I really wanted to get the kids home and fed. But on the other hand, getting home at 11:30 and then you don't get to sleep till 12:30 or 1, and then you get up the next day, and the next day you're exhausted. At least that's my perception. I don't know if everybody else feels that. I shouldn't talk in the first person, but somehow staying up that late is always hard for me to be productive. So that was.
But I know when we were setting the calendar, that was something we thought we had heard from the committee.
Yes.
So it sounds like Chris has some conflicts with some of the dates that are on here, and it might be better for him to work directly with the chair, and then you come back to me, and maybe we can make some recommendations.
But can I hear more about the 6 o'clock from,
Can I just
do we
speak-
have a general consensus to not do 6 o'clock or to do 6 o'clock? You would
I would love to
prefer
prefer
6 o'clock?
Can I just speak to this from those of us who are the day help have already been on the job for 12 hours by 6 o'clock. And so starting at 7 for us, and for some of us who have long commutes, getting out at 11 means we get home at midnight. We're just not that productive. I mean, we're much more productive from 6 to 9 than we are from 7 to 10. And by 10, we're babbling. And so, that's what the science says. And so if you've been awake for 12 hours, it's like you've had 3 drinks. I mean, it's really, there's some biological.
Drive home.
And then and it's so if it's convenient, but it may be that one or more school committee members has a family commitment that means we have to start at 7, or sometimes at 7:30 if we can't get a quorum. So we're open and flexible, but the 6 helps, I think, all of us, and it really helps the central office folks and the principals and other people who are presenting often.
And I think that that it's only once a month with going to the once a month morning meeting as well, so it wouldn't be more than.
I like the 6 o'clock, generally speaking. I thought there was a time of year where it was difficult for some.
There is a time of year that it's difficult when people have softball and or dance and or
Right.
you name a number of concerts. But the flip side of that is it is only 8 dates.
Right.
It's a total of 8 dates. So
When you put it into the perspective of once a month. Okay.
Right. Right.
I can see that.
I like 6. Michelle, were you saying, I'm sorry. if
That's
you had
okay,
a
go
reason.
for it.
Did you, I just wrote down 9/10. Were you saying we would add that meeting on the 10th?
The 10th that we're holding, because we're thinking it might be leadership team dinner,
September 10th.
September 10th.
So,
Because I'm just trying to give people some dates also to hold,
yep, got it.
so that we're not scrambling at the last minute, in effect.
And just to clarify what you were saying, Judy, as we get closer to the 6 PM dates, then we just evaluate what's on the schedule, like if there is a concert or concert.
We'd have to know probably a good month in advance, because it needs to be posted to the public.
Right, right.
In general,
But when we talk about them.
yeah, in general, folks either come late or choose to fulfill their family obligation. And there are many school committee members who've missed things with their kids because the meeting is scheduled, and that's just the way it is over the years that I've worked with school committees, and it's certainly my own children.
Dawn
were
goes
woefully
instead of me.
neglected. Right, I mean, I think, I can't remember missing more than 1 or 2 school committee meetings in my entire career. And so we just make it, it is what it is. Once you settle on your public dates, you try to stick with them, that's all.
Right.
Michelle,
Yes.
can I strongly encourage you to put the December 10th tentative date as an AM meeting? Because December 10th is
Yep.
prime pageant season.
Yes. Good thinking.
Holiday pageants, dance pageants,
Choral
choral concerts.
Orchestra concerts.
Yes.
I think of pageant differently.
Yeah.
So
I wasn't using that term.
on a related note of, strong suggestions, so with respect to January, you just pick that month in particular, so we have to have a public hearing, right, on the budget.
Right.
And we typically have that public hearing in the last week of July. And we
January?
We typically, January, thank you. And we typically, we use that time. It's hard to predict, right, what it'll be like next
Right.
year. I mean, the override passed
Right.
wonderfully, right? But also, as we know, some other things have already come up that are now reducing the net available revenue to us for like years 2 and 3. So we may be having some difficult Judy's already nodding yes. We will be having some difficult conversations. So I would kind of hope we could hold the 28th, only because that's going to give us that time we need to be sure we're ready to vote a budget. I mean, things will come up.
Ellen's going to be done by the 15th, so.
And I guess I'm weighing the value of holding a third date in January versus adding a third date in January. If I hear from members that it is better to put a date on the calendar for themselves because your lives and your schedules are busy, then I see the value in adding a third date, only so that you hold that as open. But once we publish this, it becomes public, so we would have to be careful to make sure to remove that date then, if we didn't, which would be the downside.
But can I ask the question this way, Michelle? Judy, when do you think you would be presenting your superintendent's recommended budget to the school committee? Are you thinking that's January 7th?
I'm hoping.
So,
We'll probably meet every week in January, though, depending on we'll have a joint meeting with the finance committee. I mean, we have a lot of meetings in December and January.
Fun times.
but in
Right,
other
and we
words-
can't predict when the
we
finance
can't-
committee will be available.
But
right
like,
now.
I like that there's a meeting before, I like, Michelle, that there is a meeting after the 7th, but before the end of the month, that would end, especially because it's a 9:30 a.m. meeting,
Mm-hmm.
that will, I expect that's going to be a really interesting meeting, because we can all
Right.
pepper Judy with questions we haven't already, and really get into the nitty-gritty of some things,
Right.
right? But then we need to hear each other's questions, hear
Right,
what Judy and
absolutely.
Ellen have to share, and then I think we need to be voting our budget for year 2 in an evening meeting.
We usually vote after the
I mean,
public
are we going to
hearing.
hold a public hearing at 10
No.
o'clock in the morning?
No. But we don't have to have a meeting. We can do a public hearing as a separate.
I think that's what
Event.
Chris is asking, if we can hold the 28th as a public hearing, so
Let me
it's on
just
a calendar.
double check. Yeah, I could do the 28th if,
Oh, yeah, no, another, so I didn't mean what I think you just interpreted, but I should have said it that way. I mean, you can have a meeting, right, specifically for one thing. We just
Right.
did, we just did that this year for things like
Right.
power purchase agreements, and
right.
those were good meetings, because we actually fully understood them and then discussed
Right.
it, and then we voted. So if it takes an hour, it takes an hour.
Right,
Yeah, like, so the 28th could be a public hearing and then a vote.
Right.
Having, presumably, we've done all the work ahead of time.
right.
I'm not trying to make extra work for us, I hope you.
Michelle, are you looking for a motion on this, or do you want to come back with something I'm a little confused where we stand.
Can we do a motion as amended, so we don't have to come back with this again? And if there are dates that change, then we can just,
Including the September 10th date, the December 10th date,
and the January
and the January
20th.
28th date?
Yep,
I move we approve the proposed school committee dates for 2019, 2020 as amended with September 10th, tentative at 5 p.m., December 10th, and January 28th, both time to be determined.
Second.
All in favor?
28th is an evening?
yes.
28th and
Yeah.
evening.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And now we move on to the vote to approve the Winchester robotics travel. Judy, I think you're presenting this
So
one.
this is one of those quirky ones where you don't know whether you're advancing in the competition unless you've won the last one. So this is an overnight robotics trip to Oklahoma, and we, one member may want to recuse himself from this vote.
Maybe
since-
two, or
maybe
maybe
two.
one.
Do we have two members' children's going to?
Not on this one.
Not on this
Okay.
one.
He's been to this one before, he's done.
So, I think you've got information about students traveling, the cost. One thing I would like to clarify is it says scholarship is not applicable. Certainly if there are students who have need, we find a way to fund those students, so I don't think you need to worry about that. This is one of those where these students have earned this. I still have, I get a little queasy when I think of spending $1,000 per student, but when small numbers of students travel, it's more costly, obviously.
Can I clarify that the final cost, which is not accurately listed here, was $950?
$950, so they brought it down a little
Yeah.
bit in the end. So that's helpful. So that's all the information I have. I think it went very smoothly last year, and, we're anticipating another smooth trip.
May I make a comment? I don't feel I do need to recuse myself from voting on this. As for the DC trip, there were 3 parents sitting on this board when we voted on the DC trip. So the fact that I'm the only one who has a child who is planning on attending this, I don't think discounts me.
No, you're always welcome to vote.
Thank you.
And I agree with that 100%, because I voted on this trip before.
I think she was just offering the opportunity.
I was giving him an out in
Thank
case
you.
he didn't want to tell his child she couldn't go on the trip, because he
All right,
voted
so I have a
against it.
question, and I apologize, because I'm only now seeing this sort of small font. I believe we have a student listed on this list who graduated a year ago.
A year ago.
Yes. So I'm looking to the superintendent and the policy subcommittee that, to your point, this is an earned trip. So
Right.
if we vote to approve this trip, this is for the current students of Winchester High School, as well as any seniors who just graduated who earned this trip because they participated in the New England competition, and for Charlie and any other chaperone who's going. That this is
Is it-
not a trip for prior graduates of Winchester High School.
Is it possible they're acting as a chaperone or a,
Normally, we wouldn't let a.
I mean, not a
19-year-old
chaperone, but as an advisor?
Right, it could be, I'll ask.
That's what I
I'll
meant.
ask.
Thank you, Zena.
This is, you don't typically get a list of the students who are
No.
going, and so approving the trip is, I think, separate from that, but here's what I would say about us, and you may have more information than I do. Sometimes students walk at graduation and have not yet completed the graduation requirements or haven't accepted a diploma. And so they, assumption, you may know something I don't know, but looking at the list, I'm not sure who is, but see me afterwards and I'll double check. Because normally, the only people who go on the trip are the chaperones, the students who've earned it, or someone who's acting in, an assistant coach capacity or something
Right.
like that.
In other words, to parse your words, we don't even have it's not even our authority to approve for someone who's graduated from Winchester High School to go to Norman, Oklahoma and participate in the conference. They
You're
can do that
actually
if they
just
want.
approving the trip, the whole trip,
Yeah.
not who's
This
going.
is a trip for our students. This is a trip for our students,
Right.
the seniors who've earned it, and the chaperones who are going.
And that's what
Right.
you're approving, right?
That's it.
If
Right.
approved, can you follow up on
Yeah,
that
I'll
one
follow up.
issue? And that would be, I would consider that your.
Yeah. And,
Purview.
and I will make sure we all feel comfortable in the administrative ranks about who's going.
Right.
Great.
Excellent. Thank you.
I move to approve the overnight field trip to Norman, Oklahoma as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I hope they have a fabulously successful trip. Certainly they do
Yes.
a great
It will
job.
be cooler than last year, which was Death Valley, and it got to 130 degrees in the afternoon.
That's
Norman,
that's an experience.
Oklahoma may not be immune from
Hot, but
that
it's not that hot.
And then I think the last thing we have on our agenda is the food service contract. Alan?
So we're just finishing year 2 of our 3-year options with Whitson's. The food service contract is structured so they are 1-year contract. The initial contract was a 1-year contract with 2 additional 1-year options for us. We have to enter into a new contract with them annually because the Department of Education reviews all food service contracts annually and must approve them. So this is the reason why we're doing it, why you're doing it again this year.
And does that mean next year we will put out?
So early next year, right after school gets up and running and the buses and everything is done, we will put out again the request for proposal for food service vendors to provide proposals, and that'll be for a new cycle of 3 1-year.
Questions?
Move to approve a 1-year extension of the food service contract with Whitson's Culinary Group as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And then I would just like first to remind people that Kidsborough has one last meeting.
Actually, it's not going to be the last
Yeah, I
meeting.
just looked at Ellen.
So Kidsborough has been wonderful and receptive to feedback, and it was brought to my attention that there were some folks who have children who had other things going on last week as well as early this week, especially with high school graduation. That was really a priority for many families who do have some younger children that they would be interested in looking at Kidsborough for. So Kidsborough will be hosting one more open house next week. It will be at the high school, and the day we're still working out the details about the date and time. So once we have that, we will be sending out an all-call to everyone to let them know about that one additional open house. It's just so people who didn't have the opportunity to either get to the elementary school where their child goes to, or were tied up with graduation festivities last week, have the opportunity just to come and see. Or if you went and you had some additional questions or you want to come and sign up, we have another open house tomorrow night at Ambrose as well.
Right.
So it's been
Excellent.
great feedback and a lot of great
Good
support.
questions being asked.
Very good
Yeah.
questions being asked.
There's a website, Kidsborough has a website and a Winchester page on the website. So feel free to access that or refer that to people if they have questions.
And I want to congratulate all the artists from the Town Day Art Show. There was some lovely work from our kindergartners through our high schoolers. It always seems far too short-lived. They were able to add Friday night this year, which was...
All day Friday, too.
Yeah.
And lots of high school classes walked over to see it, which was great.
Oh, that's great, too.
During the day
I
on
miss
Friday.
when we had it in here.
We can do that again. That's a
yeah.
sort of a separate, smaller show. We'll do that again.
And also all of the flash mobs and our talented dancers that performed on stage on the town common and musicians and just, it was a lovely, not only community sharing, but it turning into as much of an arts event as it is a community event too. So that was lovely to see this year. Chris, did you want to add something I hear?
I thought
Okay.
the art exhibition was amazing. You get to spend 2 hours in there.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was great. Our
Very,
kids
very
were-
some
talented kids.
very talented kids.
I do want to commend on Town Day, Jen Ellen Emma and Lori Kirby both did the road race, the Whiffy Road Race, so.
Nicely done.
Fitness walk, the fitness walk.
Woohoo! You're gonna get a whole administration team next year too.
Yeah, lots of teachers, it was fun. It's a wonderful day for it too.
And I had the pleasure of attending the Gold Award ceremony last night for two of our graduating seniors. So Maddie Hamilton and Elizabeth Rosmani were both awarded the highest level of service award for Girl Scouts, the Gold Award. Maddie worked on a project in the Fells, restoring some owl populations to the Fells, and Elizabeth Rosmani has left a legacy at our high school by starting a social justice club in cooperation with the Multicultural Network. So that was nice to see a different scene there from our kids. And of course, this is our last official meeting before summer vacation, so I would like to hope that everyone out there has a safe and happy summer vacation. I hope the kids get lots of playtime outside. Enjoy the weather and the outside time while you can get it.
Superintendent's report?
Yep.
So just quickly, I want to thank everybody for their support of our seniors as they had their culminating activities. Requires lots of support, including, I needed to give a shout out to Dot Butler from the coalition. She volunteers to help support a lot of activities around prom and some other events.
And all the parent volunteers at the overnight party too, as well.
Right, and all of the other community volunteers.
Once
Or those who showed up at 4:45 in the morning to
to clean up.
Just saying.
Well, you were up anyway. You're the organizer, so. So many thanks to families for all their support for the last 13 years for many of our students.
Yes.
The senior events were great. I do want to share with the committee that one of the things we're waiting to do is to look at a variety of data points around school start time to assess its effectiveness. But I got a wonderful email today from a graduating senior who wanted to thank me and the committee for changing the school start time. She said it was incredibly beneficial. The extra 45 minutes of sleep allowed her to be happier, more relaxed, improved her GPA, and it really made a huge difference in her life. And I think that there are lots of silent kind of recipients of the change in school start time. So all the work that you and the others in the community have done to make this happen, I think really paid off. That was like a made my day kind of email this morning.
Yeah, that was great.
So that was great. And that's all I have for today.
Future agenda items, we still have the Fields Master Plan whenever they are ready to share that with us.
Soon.
We will have an update on the district's participation in MCIEA. We will have our district goals, and our next meeting date, we will be meeting June 11th for a workshop, and we will be meeting now June 20th
At 9:30.
at 9:30 a.m. Just for a short meeting there. And then our summer meetings, as we mentioned, July 23rd and another one in August. And now we need a roll call vote to adjourn to executive session.
Or do I move it first?
Move it first.
I move to adjourn to executive session.
Second.
Purposes, you gotta read that one.
You got to read the whole thing. Sorry.
Page 3.
It's okay. I need to get used to it. I move to adjourn to executive session for purposes of discussing strategy related to union, units B and C, and non-union superintendent contracts, since to do so in open session has been deemed detrimental to bargaining.
Second. That.
Aye.
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 Thank you.
So moved.
Do you want to stay here? I'm sure people need a little.